Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. I am your host, Richard Johnson, joined by my guys, Brad Crawford and Emory Hunt. No Thanksgiving spreads to talk about just yet. We're talking college football spreads for this weekend's games. First of all, guys, let's talk about a big impact injury with the Louisville Cardinals. Running back Isaac Brown out for a while for Louisville. They play Cal. 18.5-point favorites are the Cards against the Golden Bears. 50.5 is the total number. Brown has been averaging 8.6 yards per rush on 91 carries so far this season. He's been an absolute bucket for the Cardinals on the ground. He's really paced that offense and given them a second gear. But Brad, as Louisville tries to fancy themselves a dark horse in this a dark horse in the college football playoff race, they are certainly one of the leaders in the ACC race. How do you think this injury is going to affect the Cardinals moving forward?
I'm a little bit worried about how this is going to impact them because you don't just replace a guy, Richard, who's averaging, 8.6 yards per carry. And you talk about those handful of teams that still has a shot in the ACC, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Duke even. Louisville has the toughest remaining schedule. They play Clemson here in a couple weeks. Obviously, Clemson's down a little bit, still has quality players, and then plays SMU near the end of the month. So Louisville probably going to be favored in both those games, but has a tough slate to win out and get to Charlotte and play. So just like Arizona State losing Jordan Tyson at wideout a couple weeks ago and how that damaged ASU's offense, I think this is going to critically impact Louisville losing Isaac Brown.
Emory Keywan Brown steps in 94 yards against Virginia Tech, 95 yards a week before against Boston College. He's a capable runner, but he's not Brown. Brown is just an absolute explosive play waiting to happen.
Right, and anytime you lose guys that could score from anywhere on the field, that could ring up their cash register pretty quickly, you lose a bit of your identity on offense. That's one less threat they have to worry about. I just found it fascinating when we put up that graphic of Louisville in the last 5 games. They were double-digit point favorites. And normally when you see graphics like that, you'll see 2005, 1978, 1996. All that from the same year, this telling you right now, they're not covering in this ball game versus Cal. They couldn't cover versus Eastern Kentucky, Bowling Green, JMU, or Boston College. So losing, and that's when they had, Isaac Brown. And without him in the mix, man, this is going to be tough for them to cover that point spread against Cal. And they may find themselves in a bit of a dogfight versus the Golden Bears as well.
Yeah, look, Cal, JKS, Jaron Chiavi-Sangapolatelli, tremendous quarterback prospect, very raw as a player, still needs to be refined as a passer, but every now and then you see it in there from him. He's going to have to deal with a Louisville defensive front that is going to come after him, that is going to speed his clock up, make him throw outside the pocket, off-platform throws, third highest pressure percentage for any defense in college football this season. That's Louisville. 44% pressure from their pass rush. They give a ton of different looks. They'll march guys up on the line of scrimmage and then drop them out at the snap. Sometimes they'll come guns blazing and it will look like a punt block. Brad, this Louisville defense is really good. Can Cal get them just a little bit, enough to cover 18.5 for the Golden Bears?
Yeah, Jeff Brom alluded to it a couple weeks ago before Louisville beat Miami and had those 2 early first quarter touchdowns. We have a pretty good defensive line too, y'all. And they showed that against the Hurricanes. Obviously, cornerback play was elite in that game as well, picking off Carson Beck late. I think Louisville has one of the more underrated defenses, at least within that front 7 in college football. It's going to be a tough afternoon for Cal. 18.5 points is a lot, but Louisville's a team that there is a reason that they're almost a 3-touchdown favorite in this game and one of the front runners right now at number 15 in the polls to get to the playoff.
Cal 0-4 against the spread in the last 4 games. That's tied the longest active against the spread losing streak in a power conference entering week 11. Emory, do you think Louisville gets this one done here?
Winning, yes, but covering, I don't think so. And what's interesting is that it's funny how the perception of one's offense kind of dictates how we view the team as a whole, because Brad nailed it. They are very good on defense, but we always are only focused on their passing game, their offense, and we ignore how good they've been defensively. But I do love when I see, teams that have an identity like that come in and play and surprise folks. And so we'll see. We'll learn a lot about Louisville and their chances moving forward, how they play this game. This is a game on paper they should dominate. If they come out and dominate, then we got to start taking Louisville seriously as a playoff contender.
Let's talk Heisman, fellas. Julian saying, I should say, plus 180 to win the Heisman. Fernando Mendoza plus 220. Two of the Big Ten's best are the two shortest odds to hold the Stiff Arm Trophy in New York City in early December. We'll see how that goes as far as who will win the award for the most outstanding player in college football. But my question to you guys is more about how these players are going to get there, because let's be honest, guys. You got Ohio State minus 28.5 against Purdue. You got Indiana minus 14.5 against Penn State. These teams have taken care of business. They've been dominating all season long. Brad, how do you think the fact that, frankly, these guys don't play a lot of fourth quarters, they don't play a lot of full 60-minute games, how does that affect their stats and their chase for the Heisman Trophy?
Yeah, and they're probably going to play even less of the second half in November, Richard, because these teams are, headed to the playoff and trying to win a national championship, not trying to beat up on teams 65-10. Ryan Day is known to be a little bit of a stat filler late in the year. Obviously, Kirk Cignetti is doing the same thing with Mendoza, trying to get him to Heisman finalist contention. I will say that Ohio State's the only team out of those two with Indiana that plays a ranked team down the stretch, and that comes at Michigan in the finale. So Julian Sayin has a spotlight opportunity that maybe a Fernando Mendoza does not have over these next few weeks. But there is a reason that Heisman finalists aren't named until after Conference Championship weekend. That's going to be a huge game, Ohio State, Indiana, in Indy, if these teams win out here in a couple weeks. And I fully expect both of these guys, Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza, to be two of the four or so Heisman finalists in New York.
Sayin would be the first Buckeye to win the award since Troy Smith in 2006. I know Emory remembers Troy Smith. And Emory, what do you think about the fact that, look, Ohio State launched their Julian Sayin Heisman campaign earlier this week, but you'll notice they also launched a Jeremiah Smith Heisman campaign earlier this week, which makes sense because Jeremiah Smith's the best receiver in the country. How do you square the fact that, obviously Julian Sayin is a tremendous quarterback with outstanding accuracy, but at the end of the day, one of the things that makes him go is the fact that he's got the best receiver in number 4 in the country?
Glad you brought that up, Richard, because this sort of reminds me of not Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, but more Jason White and Adrian Peterson. And when you look at the split votes, Adrian Peterson should have won it the year Jason White won it, right? Or Larry Fitzgerald should have won it, right? But we're going to say Jason White and Adrian Peterson because the split vote what could potentially happen between Sayin and Jeremiah Smith. But to be completely fair and honest, when we were looking at Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza, they don't have enough wow plays to kind of get you to thinking Heisman. That's why I think the winner will come from someone outside of those two and maybe deeper down that roster, because we know the Heisman is all about Heisman moments. It's about storylines. It's about narrative. So you can think about a Marcel Reed. Ty Simpson has a little bit more wow because people are talking more about him, but I still feel like he isn't going to have that Heisman type season as well. So Marcel Reed, Gunnar Stockton, if they continue to win in exciting fashion. Arch Manning, if they are able to continue to win games and he turns his season around. We know people love to thrust him in there. I talked about Haynes King and those guys. They played themselves out of it already. So, and Diego Pavia, but I think we're going to look at someone outside of the top two being the Heisman Trophy winner because they just seem to be a little bit more flashy than the top two right now on that list.
Ooh, Emory, spicy with the Arch Manning. Brad, I'll go to you on the Arch Manning of it all. Do you think Arch Manning he has looked better the last couple weeks. Do you think there are enough spots against Georgia, against A&M later in the season? Maybe they can sneak in the SEC championship game if enough dominoes break right in front of them. Are there enough chances for Arch Manning to impress the way he'll need to impress Heisman voters? Again, I think he's played really well the last couple weeks. I think he's really come along, but I think it's going to be hard for him to come back from the perception that he has not met the outsized expectations early enough in the season against Ohio State and in September.
Yeah, that's the key there. I mean, Arch Manning's best performance so far was that second half comeback at Mississippi State. Not exactly a Heisman signature moment because just Texas and Mississippi State fans were watching that game. Now, you mentioned the showdowns coming up against Georgia in Athens. They host possibly a number 2 or number 3 unbeaten Texas A&M team at the end of the month. And that game's going to come Thanksgiving weekend. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that game. Obviously, Arch Manning could play himself back into this Heisman picture, but unless he has 2 4-touchdown, no turnover games in those both matchups and Texas wins both, I don't see him getting to New York. Getting real quick back to that Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith argument, It reminds me a little bit of Mac Jones and Devontae Smith in 2020, except Devontae Smith had a monstrous season compared to what Jeremiah Smith's having. Carnell Tate's the guy, in my opinion, who is getting some of the votes away from Jeremiah Smith because he's having a special year as a number two. But let's be honest, he'd be number one anywhere else in college football.
Yeah, regional voting is sort of the thing that can kind of split votes the way Heisman votes are actually allocated, what Emory was kind of talking about earlier. Do you think Mendoza is going to be able to do enough, Emory, in this offense? Because the way I see Indiana, they just do what it takes to win, right? Like if they need to run the ball a bunch, they'll run the ball a bunch. If they need to throw the ball a bunch, they'll throw the ball a bunch. I think they're a little bit different than Ohio State, which I think Brad's point's really well taken that, yeah, sometimes they'll air it out a little bit to get their guy some numbers, Emory.
Mendoza tried to pad his stats last week, but it was obvious that they were padding stats, like what Ashton Genty and Boise State was trying to do last year, where they're up 35-6. He's still getting 10 carries in a row. It's like, yo, what are y'all doing? I just think what hurts Mendoza is that we don't view how he plays as flashy enough. Is he's not in the air raid offense where he's going to throw 65 touchdown passes, and he's not the supreme athlete where he's going to rip off Lamar Jackson like runs and rush for 1,000 yards in addition to what he's doing as a passer. So I just feel like he's a good player. He's more of your Johnny Unitas Award, more of your Davey O'Brien Award, as opposed to a Heisman Trophy winner.
All-American Fernando Mendoza, perhaps. All right, last topic in this block. What to expect from TJ Lateef versus UCLA? True freshman quarterback. UCLA, a 1.5-point favorite with Nico Iamaleava, Tim Skipper, trying to find a way with that interim coaching staff. It's going to be interesting to see what UCLA has for Nebraska in this spot. Look, there's a wide, varying amount of outcomes that you get with a true freshman quarterback who's taking over for Dylan Raiola, who's out for the season with a broken fibula suffered against USC last week. You can get him play up to his potential, potentially. He also could be deer in the headlights against UCLA or anywhere in between. You could really get anything from a freshman quarterback in a spot like this. He's making his first collegiate start, Brad. What are you expecting from TJ Lateef in Nebraska in this spot?
Yeah, if I'm TJ Lateef, I'm thinking, man, what an incredible opportunity this is, going back home, essentially playing UCLA in Los Angeles. Lateef is a Compton, California native, so he gets his first career start against a team that he probably grew up watching out in California. So I don't think Nebraska's offense is going to change a whole lot much without Dylan Raiola back there. Obviously, Nebraska is not going to be a team that finishes in that 9-win realm now because they lost their star player at the quarterback position. But Lateef, if I'm the UCLA defensive coordinator, I'm trying to pressure him as often as possible, give him as much exotic and different looks pre-snap, because he probably hasn't seen a lot of that in practice at Nebraska. There's a reason UCLA's favored in this game, and it's got to do with Dylan Raiola being MIA.
Emory, quickly, what do you think of the job Tim Skipper has done at UCLA, kind of keeping this thing afloat here?
I think he's done a solid job, and it shows you who players rock with. They buy into who they feel like has their best interest, and that's what we're seeing. As far as Lateef is concerned, I love to use the quote from the great song by The Alchemist, "Let It Be Known." He's from Cali, so he's not sidetracked by nice weather. I think that plays perfectly into what he's going to do for Nebraska. And I like the hints of old school football where they're allowing the freshman to get some reps in and play some games before he's actually to be called on. So he's got a lot of experience so far for a true freshman. I think he'll step in and play well.
California love all over the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. When we come back, we're going to talk about game of the week in the Big 12, BYU and Texas Tech. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. How about a little picks update for you on Friday before we get going? All three of your hosts on the show over 500. At the end of the day, we are all profitable, whether it's slightly probable or very profitable, like the great man Brad Crawford here. Christmas comes early in the Crawford household because Brad got money to buy presents for everybody. So spread a little bit of the wealth around, my brother, please. All right, guys, let's talk game of the week. BYU, Texas Tech, Big 12 showdown. We're going to talk a lot about the rest of the season. If the Big 12 can get 2 teams in the college football playoff, this game is going to go a long way to determining that, quite frankly. If the Big 12 is going to do that, Texas Tech probably has to win, and then these 2 teams are going to have to find a way to face again, because guys, Texas Tech's college football odds 74% with a win, 22% with a loss. BYU's college football odds 75.6% with a win, 30% with a loss, according to our researchers at CBS Sports. So, Brad, before we talk about picking the game, let's talk about the Big 12's college football playoffs resumes overall and how we think this is going to shake out. I know you are locked in on the committee's rankings every week.
Yeah, I think it was great news, Richard, that the Big 12 had 2 teams inside that top 8 on Tuesday night. That shows me that there is a chance, at least a path, where this conference could be a multi-bid league. I know it's not likely, depending on the outcome of Saturday's game, but if BYU were to lose in Lubbock and then still get to the championship game, maybe beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 and get that auto bid, then you're talking about a 2-loss Texas Tech team potentially being one of the last teams in. I can see why this line's 10.5 points, but I've been very impressed this season with BYU, especially on the road. They beat East Carolina. That's a G5 team going to a bowl game. Did not play its best against Colorado. Still was able to beat Coach Prime and the Buffaloes there, and then has beaten Arizona, and I think it was Iowa State that they trampled as an underdog, road underdog. So BYU's a team, sort of a road warrior mentality under Kalani Sitake.
First ever top 10 versus top 10 matchup in BYU's program history, which frankly, that's a little hard to believe. I thought the Lavelle Edwards BYU Cougars back in the 80s would have at least had something for them, but this is a massive one in Lubbock. Maybe no tortillas. We'll see. I think the folks will sneak him in there. Emory, what have you seen so far from this BYU team heading into this big spot against Texas Tech?
Resiliency, guys, and I love the fact that they have been battle tested, been punched to them out a little bit. Brad talked about their game versus Colorado. I like how they responded versus the game against Iowa State, where Iowa State got out the blocks hot and was like, man, they about to beat the brakes off BYU, but they were able to galvanize, make some plays on defense, found the football a little bit, found their footing on offense, and then found some success and went from being blown out to blowing out Iowa State. And to me, that's the mark of a team that's kind of battle tested. And I like this particular matchup because for me, it pertains to where BYU has always hung their hats is in the point of attack on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And that's where Texas Tech has spent a lot of money, and that's where they are excellent. So I think this from a football purist perspective, throughout what you already thought about BYU and Texas Tech historically with the passing game for both teams, this is about old school, who's going to win the point of attack. And that's why I feel like this line is a little bit inflated in my opinion, but we're going to get a fantastic game nonetheless.
Yeah, you got to give a lot of credit to Texas Tech because at the end of the day, they bought players who can play. And especially in the trenches, they bought guys who can absolutely play in the transfer portal. Really impressive stuff from Texas Tech from a scouting and development standpoint for the Red Raiders. BYU running back LJ Martin expected back. He's actually not even on the Big 12's availability report, so it's pretty sure that he's going to play at this point in time. Bear Bachmeier, first true freshman quarterback to start 8-0 since my Jags QB1 Trevor Lawrence did it at Clemson a few years ago back in 2018. He's going to get chased around by David Bailey, though, on Saturday. 11.5 sacks for Bailey, 55 QB pressures. Both of those lead FBS for an edge rusher. David Bailey is an incredible player off the edge for Texas Tech. And Emory, you just said it. That's where Texas Tech is the strongest, up front on the defensive line.
Yeah, and you talk about Bailey. I love the fact he goes out there with just no gloves, no tape, no nut, just going out there and just pads on. To me, those are the type of guys you take top 5, right? Because they clearly don't care about nothing but sacks, nothing but defense, and that's what you love. And when you're playing with that level of aggressiveness and attention to detail and stick-to-itiveness to really pressure and then get home, eventually, Brockmeyer, the freshman, is going to be under siege. We're going to learn a lot about his athleticism in his ball game because he's going to have to move off the spot, create off script, and create some chunk plays with his legs, because if he's this is going to be a straight drop back passing game, he's in for another story. But to his credit, he does have an offensive line at BYU that is able to hold the fort a little bit more. So that's why I'm so fascinated by this matchup, and I'm glad it's a top 10 matchup because the stakes are high, and teams like these two teams are built tend to play at their level of competition that they're going up against as well.
Brad, Will Hammond out for the season now as Texas Tech's backup quarterback. A lot of times that wouldn't matter, but it does because Baron Morton, Texas Tech's actual starting quarterback, has had trouble staying healthy, frankly, throughout his entire career, but definitely this season. So if Texas Tech has to go to QB3 for any reason because Morton may get banged up in this game, I don't know how that's going to go. But what's been your assessment, Brad, of Morton when he has been healthy in this game?
Yeah, this team's nearly unbeatable when Morton is at full strength. The problem is he has not been at full strength, Richard, for much of the season. Texas Tech cannot afford for him to re-aggravate, the side injury, the knee injury, the ankle situation. He's been banged up. And through week 10 here, he is one of the nation's leading passers in games that he has started. And losing that backup quarterback, Joey McGuire said before the season that we have two guys that we feel great about at that position. So it was one of college football's best quarterback rooms. Now it's 50-50 if you got to go with that third team guy. But Joey McGuire, I spoke to him a few weeks ago before Will Hammond's injury. He was very confident in this quarterback room, even beyond Hammond and Morton. So if we do see QB3 this weekend, I don't think Texas Tech's offense is going to change its philosophical approach.
All right, fellas, let's pick it. BYU 6-2 against the spread. Texas Tech 7-2 against the spread so far this season. Texas Tech 10.5-point favorite. Line really hasn't moved all week. Because of that, I'm taking the Red Raiders, minus 10.5. I think Texas Tech is too strong, particularly on both lines of scrimmage for BYU to get the job done. I think BYU's been getting away with it a little bit this season. They won't here against the Red Raiders. Texas Tech guns up, gets it done. Brad?
I'm going guns up too on the money line. However, I'm taking BYU plus 10.5 points. I have faded BYU often this season. I've lost all of those plays when I've picked against BYU. I'm taking the Cougars plus 10.5 here. We mentioned last segment about Baron Morton's potential to get re-aggravated injury situation. I think BYU tries to tee off on Texas Tech's O-line. It's going to be difficult, but whoever wins the line of scrimmage in this game ultimately wins the game. I like BYU to cover 10.5 points.
Yeah, I'm taking BYU plus the points here. I think LJ Martin being back in full strength is a great thing for BYU. They're going to play a physical game. I think the plan is for them to shrink the ball game and minimize the offensive possessions for Texas Tech so they can avoid the shootout. And with the stakes being high, this is essentially a playoff game, and teams tend to play tighter. I think we'll see that approach, which will help keep this game close on that scoreboard.
We're not playing tight here on the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. When we come back, we're letting it all hang out. We're hitting you with the Blitz. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. All right, fellas, we're going to whip around the country with Blitz picks. I'll start us off. Auburn plus 6.5 against Vanderbilt. Look, new regime at Auburn. DJ Durkin takes over as interim head coach after Hugh Freeze was fired. It ain't Auburn's defense's fault why they're not winning games. And I think Auburn's defense is going to be able to have enough to slow down Vanderbilt in this game. I think Vanderbilt got shown a little bit against Texas to look, if you get behind, it's kind of hard for them to catch up. And that running game was not exactly cooking against the Longhorns. So I think Auburn, similarly good on the edges, are the Tigers. And I think they're able to kind of pen Vanderbilt in and they're able to cover the 6.5 number.
I'm going to stay in the SEC and go Georgia to cover 9.5 points at Mississippi State. I took the Dogs to cover against Florida and Jacksonville last week and had it in the bag. If Gunnar Stockton doesn't need the football at the 1 yard line, man. But Florida did outplay Georgia in that game largely. Georgia lucky to win that game late. But I like the cover here at Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby, Bulldogs second-year head coach, mentioned this week that he bought 500 tickets because he didn't like how many Georgia fans he was hearing were coming to Starkville. So there's going to be a lot of red in the stadium this Saturday. I like Georgia to cover 9.5 points.
I like A&M to cover the 6.5 versus Missouri. I've seen this line at 5.5, 6.5, and 7.5. I would take all three of those lines, but because they don't have Bo Perbula, who wasn't playing particularly well as their starting quarterback, they're playing a backup quarterback. And even though A&M may come out and play flat a little bit and win this game 24-7, man, they still cover the spread, any one of those three spreads. So I like them. They're the better team. better defense, better offense, better quarterback, better pizza, and whatever, right? So lay the points with Texas A&M.
Papa John's, Notre Dame minus 26.5 against Navy. Let me tell you something. Marcus Freeman don't mess around against the service academy teams as head coach at Notre Dame. I was at the game last year against Army at Yankee Stadium when, it was unbelievable how much they dominated that Army team, and they dominated Navy last year as well. So it's a situation of, I just don't think an improving Notre Dame team is going to let themselves get tripped up. I know Blake Horvath's a great quarterback for Navy, but I love Notre Dame in this spot, minus 26.5. It's a big number, but give it to me.
I'm going to stay in South Bend. I'm on the other side here. I'll take the midshipman plus 26.5. I would love to get this line at 27 points, maybe 28 to 28.5 to feel a little bit better about it. But Navy's in a spot here where I think they can limit possessions against Notre Dame. Notre Dame obviously struggled a little bit last weekend against one of the ACC's worst teams in Boston College. Eagles now 1-8. And as Richard mentioned, Marcus Freeman has a spectacular record against these service academies. But Navy's 7-1 this season. And in last year's game, it was lopsided because I think Navy turned it over 4 times in the first half. I want to say 4 of their first 5 possessions ended in fumbles. So don't cough it up, Navy, if you want to cover 26.5 points this weekend.
I'm going company man here, Oregon versus Iowa. And you ever find it funny when you ask folks about Iowa's offense and say, oh, man, you see what they do in between the court? They wave at the hospital, children's hospital across the way. Like, yeah, tell me about the offense. What, man, you know how good corn is? Like, yeah, but what about the offense? Man, Chris Hassel on CBS Sports Network is a big Iowa. Tell me about the offense. Like, they never tell you about the offense. I don't trust the offense. I don't care how low this point spread is. Give me Oregon to win by double digits. Lay a 6.5 for the Ducks.
I would go Alabama minus 10 against LSU. Look, you say what you want about the Crimson Tide so far this season, but under Kalen DeBoer, they really don't mess around when they're coming off a bye week in a big game spot. It's kind of the sleepy time when I'm worried about Alabama, the trap game spots when I worry about Alabama. I don't worry about Alabama in a spot like this against an LSU team that is, I think, going to struggle to move the ball. And even though their corners are really good, don't really like LSU. They've been just so up and down so far this season. I think Bama takes care of business in this game.
Heading to the Big 12, I'll take Kansas as a road underdog plus 5.5 at Arizona. Jayhawks 1 win away from bowl eligibility. And I think Lance Leipold knows that this weekend is the best opportunity over these final 3 games to get to that 6-win threshold. Jalen Daniels, quarterback for the Jayhawks, he makes enough plays in this game for Kansas to keep it close throughout and does enough in the end to cover. Give me Kansas plus 5.5 points on the road.
Tell me about the Iowa offense, man. They got a nice personality. Stop talking about the Iowa offense, everything but Iowa offense, right? I will give shout out to my guy, Jerry Mack, the head football coach at Kennesaw State. Love the come up he has come up from. Head coach at North Carolina Central. Now he's gotten the Owls bowl eligible in their second season at FBS play. I love the fact that they're going into Las Cruces with something to prove continuously. So I will lay the 9.5 points with the Owls here versus New Mexico State, who has quite possibly the worst quarterback play in the FBS, and that's saying volumes because we see UMass still out there playing football too.
Give me Duke minus 9.5 against UConn. UConn's honestly a pretty good story so far this season, but I think Duke is just really strong, especially with what they have up front on defense. I really like the Blue Devils to take care of business in a big way in this spot and keep rolling and trying to keep themselves hot as they get into the stretch run here of the ACC race with a chance to play for the ACC title game.
I'm going to an underrated game inside the Big Ten. It's Friday night. Tonight's game, Northwestern at USC, 9 p.m. local start. Tough spot for Northwestern tonight, but the Trojans are 1-4 against the spread this season, and it's coming on a short week. I think this is a great opportunity for Northwestern to take advantage of the Trojans looking ahead to the Iowa game next week between 2 top 20 programs still in the playoff mix. Northwestern's had an extra week of prep time after losing to Nebraska on the road. I like the Wildcats, who are one of the better stories in the Big Ten this season. Nobody's talking about plus 14.5 in Los Angeles.
Based off what happened last weekend in the ACC, you now are looking at the undefeated Virginia Cavaliers in ACC play. And it's fascinating because, yes, I wink because we know they lost to NC State in a non-conference conference game. But I see now that there is a clear path for them to run away with it until the ACC title game, and they're going to not lose hold of the rope against Wake Forest. I think they'll outpace them and put up 40-plus points against the Demon Deacons, so I can trust them in laying the 6.5.
Big one in the G5 race, giving Memphis -3.5 against Tulane. Tulane struggles themselves to run the ball. I think their physicality is a little bit overrated so far this season. I think you saw it, last week against UTSA. They can bully a lot of it. I like Memphis in this spot, -3.5. They're going to continue to roll, I think, and hopefully be ranked next week in the college football playoff top 25.
Battle of the bad teams, Florida State at Clemson. It's hard to believe it's November 7th, fellas. Neither of these teams is ranked, and neither of them is in the ACC title race. Tell us that 4 months ago, we'd have been crazy. But at some point, this home losing streak to FBS Power Conference competition for the Tigers has to lose 6 straight losses under Dabo to teams of that nature. I think Clemson gets it done this weekend, -1.5 points. Take Clemson money line, take them to cover anything under 2. In case this game goes to overtime, you see some 2-point conversion type scenarios. I like Clemson to get close to bowl eligibility, beating Mike Norvell's Noles.
Richard, turn your volume up because I want you to hear this clearly what I'm saying because I'm about to double down. This is why we need a 2014 playoff. San Diego State has a potential to go 12-1, and no one cares. This is a very good football team, outstanding defense, and they take on a very good Hawaii offense. But I like the fact that we have a strength versus strength battle. Good offense versus great defense. Great defense wins every time, especially when they have the point of attack that they have. I love the Aztecs here, laying the 6.5 points with San Diego State. Beat them in 2014 playoffs so they can get in.
Speaking of 6.5 points, West Virginia -6.5 against Colorado. Guys, the vibes continue to be terrible out in Boulder. Maybe there's a new offensive play caller. Looks like there's going to be a new quarterback as well, and Juju Lewis, the freshman, stepping in, the third quarterback that Colorado has started so far this season. West Virginia has its own quarterback issues, but Scotty Fox has come in, the freshman, the last couple weeks, and given them just a little bit on offense, a little bit of consistency. I get West Virginia -6.5 here.
I'm going to LA, UCLA -1.5 to beat Nebraska. Freshman quarterback for Nebraska. We talked about it in the previous segment. This is going to be a tough spot for a guy who is a true freshman against what I consider a defense that has been improving as the season has progressed since that coaching change. UCLA, we talked about it. Ample time to prepare for this game coming off that 50-point loss at Indiana. And by the way, UCLA's bowl hopes under the new head coach right now, the interim coach, still have hopes alive if they're able to win this game against Nebraska. I like UCLA -1.5 points here to beat the Huskers.
Speaking of interim head coach, I appreciate how Penn State's interim coach is not using his timeouts. Bro, keep that game rolling. I like that, especially when you're bad. So lay the 14.5 points with Indiana. They're going to continue to do what they've done all season long, beat teams by double digits, and they continue to extend the lead and try to win style points. They'll do so against this iteration of whatever's out there in the Penn State uniform.
When we come back on the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show, we're going to talk underdogs on a Friday. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. Underdog plays for your Friday. I will start us off, fellas. I cannot figure out why Delaware is +185 against Louisiana Tech. I know this Louisiana Tech team gave LSU all they could handle like 2 months ago, but we still giving them respect for that. I think this Louisiana Tech team, you got coaches on the hot seat. I think they are struggling so far this season, and this Delaware team has been resurgent. First year up in FBS from FCS. They have proven that they belong. They obviously cannot compete for the Conference USA championship, which is a shame because it's their first year up. But the fighting Blue Hens, are going to give Louisiana Tech all they want, and Delaware is going to win this ball game.
I'm going to go a little bit off the radar. This is my biggest upset pick of the year. I like Wisconsin at +360, 11.5 point underdog to beat Washington at home at Camp Randall. I know this Badgers offense stinks. I know Wisconsin has lost 6 straight and is winless in Big Ten play, but maybe there's some renewed optimism this week after that confidence pronunciation, I guess you could call it, from Chris McIntosh, the AD there at Wisconsin, who confirmed that Luke Fickell's coming back next year. Job security in hand, I think he can kind of throw caution to the wind, pull out all the stops in this game. Washington's a team, by the way, that ranked number 22 in the playoff poll this week. Still a team that I think has some issues where if they don't get started in the run game, maybe you can kind of make the Huskies one-dimensional. So Wisconsin's due for a win, especially Luke Fickell, and I think it comes this weekend in a game that nobody's looking at.
And this should be a basketball matchup game this week. UConn versus Duke will be a fantastic football game because both teams are playing really well. And I think UConn is being criminally undervalued and underrated. Great job by Jim Moore Jr. and what he's done with that program. I like the defensive matchup versus Duke's offense. I think UConn does a great job of pulling teams down in the muck and making them play a physical game. I think that's where Duke can get themselves in a bit of a pickle out there in, I would say Stores, but it's not really Stores. It's in Hartford, Connecticut, where the stadium is. A whole kind of chaotic situation. Build an on-campus stadium for UConn, but they'll win this ball game versus Duke.
Emory, how are you feeling about the vote of confidence Brad was just talking about with Luke Fickell at Wisconsin?
I will say this, though. Like, maybe he's coming back next year to come clean out the rest of his stuff because I don't see them winning against Washington, but we'll get to that in parlay. But I do like the vote of confidence because, man, if you're Luke Fickell, you're like, okay, I can now recruit, stockpile a team, and we may, to Brad's point, go out there and play inspired ball because for all intents and purposes, he's a very good guy, very good coach. It's that he's in an unfortunate situation, but we've always talked about this, guys. Sometimes it's best to be where you are, be that big fish in a small pond. I guarantee if you ask him right now, he says he loves Skyline chili more than he does, cheese curds. I'll tell you that.
We'll have some cheese curds for you when we come back on the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. We're going to have motto plays and then, of course, the Friday parlays. Welcome back to the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show. All right, fellas, enough from us. Let's hear from the machines, the computers. What do the computers say this week for the model play of the week? Jax State fighting Gamecocks, minus 114. Money line against UTEP. 79% of the simulations have Jax State prevailing. The model is 5-5 so far through week 9. So the model's trying to get above 500, just like all of us will get there in the end. All right, fellas, I don't know if we've got an Emory Hunt classic 10-teamer, 15-teamer out, whatever he's given us. We'll get to Emory in a second, but I'll start us off on Friday parlays. I'm going to give you a 3-legger here. Mississippi State plus 9.5 versus Georgia to start us off. I think the Bulldogs finally getting off the schneid in SEC play. I think they're going to have a little something for the Dogs. Georgia has been a slow starting outfit so far this season. They've found a way in second half so far this season. They probably will again in this game, but I like Mississippi State plus 9.5 in this game. Oregon under 42.5 versus Iowa. Look, you're going to get terrible weather. You're going to get winds. You're going to get a perfect microcosm, a perfect setting for how Iowa wants to play football. Iowa wants to drag this game into the muck. They want it to be a 9 or 10 possession game aside. If they can have that, they want to force you to execute. I think Mark Gronowski is going to be toting the mail in this game. And I think Iowa and Oregon go under 42.5 in this spot. Points will not be aplenty here. UCLA minus 1.5 against Nebraska to close out. It's my third leg. TJ Lateef, freshman quarterback for Nebraska, coming in this spot against a UCLA team that is at least hanging on so far this season with interim head coach Tim Skipper. All those three plus 629 for my 3-leg parlay.
Trying to cash a parlay for the 5th time this season, first time since week 5 after we were really hot early, and we keep losing by 1 game every week. Not this week. We're going to cash this one. Going 3 legs here. Clemson money line against Florida State. Dabo Swinney has got to win this game after basically in front of his AD's face last week after losing that 46-45 game to Duke, saying, hey, he can fire me if he wants to. I mean, maybe Clemson might want to think about that if he loses against Florida State. That's not going to happen. Tigers money line there. I'm tailing Richard with that UCLA pick. I like UCLA money line over Nebraska. Clemson, UCLA, by the way, those are both 1.5 point spreads, so you get some value on the money line there. And then to cash this three-teamer, Alabama -9.5 against LSU. Richard said it earlier. Alabama in spots where they want to play hard, they do play hard. And this is a scenario in which rivalry game LSU, I don't think they'll get caught looking ahead whatsoever. Ty Simpson, 3 touchdown passes, covers in this game. So Clemson money line, UCLA money line, Alabama -9.5 to cash 547.
Quickly, can we get that graphic of the model play first before we go to my fantastic parlay? Because when we showed the model play, the model is what, 5-5? Like, that's why James Evans on Good Times used to be upset. These damn computers. The model's supposed to be undefeated, right? So, all right, enough of that. Let's go to the parlay, because this time we're going to do a little something different. We got North Dakota State -10.5 against North Dakota. That's the 1 point spread I like. They're a juggernaut this year once again. And then we're going straight money line. Delaware State tonight against Oregon State. That's a tricky game down in Baltimore, but I like Delaware State to win that one. I love Villanova straight up over Towson. Mercer versus Western Carolina is going to be the best FCS game of the weekend. All kind of points. I think Mercer's defense is a little bit better than the Catamounts. I like them. South Dakota State versus South Dakota. South Dakota State lost to Indiana State last weekend. I feel bad with those Jackrabbits about to do those Coyotes out there in Vermilion, South Dakota. Georgia straight up over Mississippi State, and Washington money line over Wisconsin. And when I hit this parlay, guys, you know those grills everybody got? I'm going to get an iced out grill. I'm going to get iced out contacts, iced out headband. I'm going to give me an iced out throwback Gerald Honeycutt Tulane jersey, basketball jersey. Go do your Googles and look them up.
Emory, what about your man Deshaun Jackson saying Delaware State's nobody's homecoming game anymore? You see those comments?
Listen, #1 rushing offense in the FCS. Clint Portis got those dudes running the heck out of the football. They are a legit wagon. They're going to be the MEAC representative in the Celebration Bowl. And if it wasn't for that tie-in, we'd be talking about a team going into the playoffs and winning at least 2 games in that regard as well.
And you're on the other side of me with the Georgia game, Emory. You're taking Georgia on the money line there?
Yeah, I think we'll see an entertaining game. That's why I stayed away from the point spread. I just went it straight up money line. Georgia will get the win and knock out the Bulldogs of Mississippi State.
Brad, you're taking Clemson money line against Florida State. I mean, look, Clemson, you mentioned it. Clemson needs it to darn near stay bowl eligible, I should say. What do you think about kind of the future of this Clemson program if they're able to get this done in this game? Can they get on just a little bit of a run moving forward here the back half of the season?
Man, we don't have enough time to dissect what Clemson needs to do to get back to being a playoff contender. Starts with Dabo Swinney in the transfer portal. He's got to change his philosophy there. And I'm going to say one thing to Emory. Doesn't he know that ice and diamonds is so 2000? It's all about silver and gold now, man. The precious metals is what's going on in the market, not the ice. So, but yeah, Clemson, I think, wins this game against Florida State. Mike Norvell, he's another guy that the Alford athletic director there for the Seminoles gave him his vote of confidence a couple weeks ago, too. I don't think Norvell gets fired, but, man, Clemson FSU being an unranked matchup, it just doesn't feel right on November 7th.
It doesn't matter if you're wearing diamonds or gold. It doesn't matter if you think Thanksgiving is a holiday or not. At the end of the day, you get my vote of confidence all day, every day. Brad Crawford and Emory Hunt. I'm your host, Richard Johnson. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the CBS Sports College Football Pick Show.